Good morning, Monsignore, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation and for this sublime and cordial organization. I'll talk a little about the challenges of a permanent workshop in the changing times. St. Stephen's is, of course, a tourist attraction with about 5 million visitors a year, in a non-corona year. But firstly, it's a church with offering 8 holy masses on Sundays and 6 on weekdays, and is open from 6 to 10 p.m. We're also very, very active in confessions, with about 100 priests offering confession all the day from 7 in the morning to 10 in the evening. But the cathedral has never been only a place of worship and holy service. It's also, and for some people preliminary, it's a monument. And it's not a modern thing that the cathedral is a monument. It has ever been a monument and a tourist attraction. We have here a printed pilgrim's guide for the reliquaries in St. Stephen's, and it's not a very prominent thing. Every pilgrim could buy such a guide to the reliquaries and see St. Stephen's. It was also a symbol and shelter for the city, and a landmark and object for respect and identification. This Valletta view is important for our UNESCO cultural heritage discussion now, but that's a totally different thing. But it shows how important St. Stephen's was for the city, of course. And the cathedral is used as a trademark, and a little bit astonishing, as a symbol for the connection of mankind to heaven. This ladder to heaven has been in St. Stephen's for 2 years. It's now removed.
Listen.
And it's planned to put it on the tower of the Vienna City Hall. Maybe that will inspire our city government for better decisions. But in history, it was also used as observation point in case of war and for the fire brigades with older and newer technical supplies. On top of the tower, imperial eagles were flying and came down to celebrate the coronation of Maximilian II, for example, and for now, from 1686 on, imperial eagle is as a symbol of the emperor on top of the tower. Unfortunately, it's still topped by a cross. The emperors and dukes used the cathedral for their own representation in graves, and not only in the apsis, also in the center of the church and on the portals of the cathedral. But now I want to focus on our restoration work and the relation between building activities and religious services. St. Stephen's was a building site almost the whole Middle Ages, from 1137 to 1513. This is unfortunately not a picture of the building activities in Vienna. It's Klosterneuburg, 20 kilometers north of Vienna, the foundation of the church of the monastery of Klosterneuburg with the legend. And you can see the workers are still active. The architect presents the project to the count and the countess. And you can see just a wooden roof above the elder bush with the mystic legend. And under the roof there is an altar ready for service. So the coincidence of building and religious services are very often in the Middle Ages. We found the same similar situation in Vienna. In the cathedral, you can see the development of the ground plan. On the left side, there is in black the Romanesque church, and in the 14th century the nave was made broader, and you can see this small strip between the Romanesque and the Gothic walls were used for for a chapel with an altar that was consecrated in the 14th century and used, and on the other side the workers were still active and doing their job there. Well, 1513, the medieval church was more or less finished. The building activities were stopped. And the modern times, the post-Middle Age times, focused on the change of the interior. The change of liturgical needs forced as well a change of the interior. Here is a view of the interior of St. Stephen's in 1647. The first interior view we have. And you can see the modern Baroque altar from 1647 and still some of the Gothic altars. And you can see the new space, the new interior. The root screen has vanished and it's a unified space apt for the modern post-Tridentine Mass. In 19th century, the focus and the driving activity was not a liturgical need, it was the dream of a uniform and purified Gothic interior. And all the Baroque things still serving for the Holy Service should be removed. May it be the plans of Friedrich Schinkel, who visited Vienna 1802, the giant model of Karl Schropp, who modeled St. Stephen's in 1849 and the following years, very truly exact of the interior, because he removed everything that was Baroque or Renaissance and put in some altars, not very inspired and not very inspiring. Thanks God, none of these plans were executed, only a few. And at the end of 19th century or in the 20th century, we have an interior serving traditional masses, serving all the liturgical needs, and showing Tardo-Gothic and Baroque interior. I will show it a little bit more because it's vanished now. We have this stable, the stalls, from 1470. Above, there's oratorios for music with an organ and for the imperial court. And in the back, we have the altar from 1647 and the Gothic windows. So we have a nice mixture and very well adapted for the needs of the time. And a thing here, that's a picture from Hungarian area in Byzantine style. I will focus a little bit later on. Yeah, in 1945, everything changed. St. Stephen's caught fire, and the choir was severely destroyed. Only in the middle apse, the vaults were conserved, and but the nave was also more or less intact. The church was closed and served as a workshop for the restoration. This is the nave. You can see the pulpit is still under the shelter wall built during the war, and the stonemasons prepared the stones to repair the columns and pillars. Because the nave was repaired easily and quickly, it could be reopened in 1948, and the choir was a building site till 1950. So both parts were separated by a wooden wall. You can see it from the both sides. And when the service was held in the nave already, the choir still was under reconstruction. It was not only on focus to rebuild the cathedral, it was also for the people in that times an opportunity to reorganize the church. So the Baroque things like the oratorios were removed, and some dissolution and of different uses was planned. So this grid formerly not existing, was built, you can see it on the ground plan, to separate the main part of the cathedral from the western part. Although the church is still open during the days, it is possible to have adoration and prayer in the western part till 10 o'clock in the evening, which wouldn't be possible if the whole church would be open. On the other hand, this holy painting of Maria Poch, it was said, well, the legend says that if there was a danger in the small Hungarian village of Poch, the Holy Virgin wept and so saved the village several times. It was brought to Vienna 1697. Since that, she didn't weep anymore, so maybe we are not in danger, or maybe we have never been in danger, or it's concentrated on the village where she came from. But she is an object of adoration, and originally this picture was on the high altar and is now in the western part, free for adoration during the whole day. But the problem is, since it's on the western part, it's near the place where the entering tourist groups organize, and so there's a conflict between adoration and organization and tourism. Another challenge in a normal church is to build a folk altar, which was not such a problem in St. Stephen's, because we have a historic place for an altar, except the high altar. So in the Middle Ages, the main altar was on the place where the main altar is now, so we have no conflicts with the historic situation. Of course, you can discuss the altar itself. For restoration activities in the interior, we tried to find solutions by organization in time. So most of our work is done in Lent time, when the ecclesiastical activities are on a very low level, and in the rest of the year we try to concentrate to the exterior. And if it's necessary to restore a sculpture, for example, we have a long time program to restore about 100 sculptures in the nave. Last year it was the Saint Sebastian on the left side of the nave, and you can hardly find the scaffold for the restoration, so it's not very good to see, and it's almost invisible, and so it's not a problem for the visitors, be they tourists, be they for the services. Yeah, pollution is of course a problem. The candles make the wood a little bit darker, and we have to do that. But on the other side, enlightening a candle for many of our visitors is the only activity that has to do something with the religious aspect of the cathedral. So we don't really want to stop that, but we try to improve the practice. For the conflicts of use, we try to establish separate rooms for special spiritual needs. For example, here the Chapel of St. Eligius is the Chapel of Adoration, marked red in the ground plan on the western side, but it's really very closed. You can't enter without praying and take a photograph sometimes. And here is in the northeastern tower, in the Chapel of St. Barbara, the Chapel of Meditation, with a special focus on the history of the Second World War, having ashes from Auschwitz in the Tardo Gothic cross, and a monument for Maria Restituta, Kafka, an Austrian saint, martyred during the war in 1944. And this relief is made by Alfred Hrdlička. It was his last work. He is an important and famous sculptor in Austria and Germany. And sometimes this chapel of meditation becomes a chapel of vaccination during the COVID wars years. It was used for the vaccination of people in Vienna, and well, it was accepted very well. And I bring the photos because the two branches of the Order of St. John were active here, of course. A little bit about the legal situation in Austria. The Heritage Protection Act from 1923 declares the primacy of liturgical needs above restoration needs. So every change has to be allowed if it's necessary for worship and for the participation of the people. Sometimes it's not only a conflict between restoration and liturgical needs, it's sometimes a conflict between different liturgical aspects. For example, here in Mariazell, a sanctuary in the Austrian Alps with a Gothic nucleus, you can see it marked blue, and a Baroque extension. And in the center of the extension, there's the dome, and right in the center of the dome, you can see the column of the Holy Virgin Mary here in the ground plan, and here's an old photo showing the column with the statue. And 20 years ago, for liturgical reasons, it was moved and put on the other side to the end of this room, bringing it out of the center. Well, it brings room for the parish, but on the other side, the main monument of adoration, some people say it's marking a geometrically very, very active point, was put to the periphery of the room. But to come back to St. Stephen's, I still got 2 minutes. Adolf Loos, a modernist architect in Vienna at about 1900, said St. Stephen is beautiful because every generation added to it in its own language. But beware of the objects of our generation, because our generation, we don't understand our own language. And that's always a challenge for restoration and artistry in a church. Can we find a language to fill the voids and losses in our monuments? There is a chapel with partly remained and restituted glass windows, but some losses we have to admit. And can we find a language to fill the voids and losses in our monuments? A language compatible to the cultural heritage, understandable for present generations, and that will help us and future generations to understand the message of the Church? Or will there be a closed grid between the visitors and the mystery of the cathedrals as a spiritual place? Thank you very much for your
Well, we are talking about the restoration of the chapter house in the cathedral. This is the city of Toledo. And here is the main facade, the western side on the City Hall square. Here we could see we could define it like a Toletum Bestberg, like having the tower. And then on the right side, there is no tower, but there is the Mozarabic chapel that we will talk about later because it's quite important in the development of this topic. The cathedral was built on the place of the Visigothic church on the 7th century that was later on after the invasion of the Arabs mosque. And then in 1227, it was the starting of the beginning, so the beginning of the construction of the Gothic cathedral. So we are close to the 800th anniversary of it. This is the main plan that we could see the Gothic cathedral that is like 120 meters long and 60 meters wide. And up north is the cloister. I was marking in yellow the three spaces that I think that are important for this speech. Here on the left corner is the Mozarabic chapel that actually before it was the chapter house where the chapter was taking place. Here in the middle, this is the Descension chapel that actually it is where the main altar of the Gothic church was, and it's a very important point because the Virgin Mary appeared there in the 7th century and was imposing the chasuble on Saint Ildefonsus, that was Archbishop of the Cathedral of Toledo. And then here in this corner is the position of the new chapter house built on the beginning of 16th century. This is the Descension Chapel I was mentioning before, and this is the representation of the imposition of the chasuble from the Virgin Mary to Saint Ildefonsus. Here I should introduce the figure of Cardinal Cisneros, that was a very important personality in the 16th century, the end of the 15th century in Spain. He founded the Mozarabic chapel that we could see on the right side. And this Mozarabic chapel was very important because here is held an ancient rite from the Mozarabs. The Mozarabs were the Catholic Christians that stayed in the territory conquered by the Arabs in the middle south of Spain. And they had a very nice and very interesting mass that is actually singed in Latin. So actually the melody are very nice, and also the lyrics are very, very beautiful. This mass is still going on nowadays. So if you visit the city, I will recommend you to go there. So actually the Cardinal Cisneros was a very important person because he was the Archbishop of Toledo in a very important moment. It was in the 1495 when just 3 years later than the Spanish was reconquered the whole Spanish territory from the Arabs. It was also 3 years later than the discovery of America. And he was actually a regent, so actually substituting the kings of Spain in 2 periods. So actually was a very forward person and with a strong character. Here we could see the tomb that is in the University of Alcalá de Henares. That is actually the oldest university in Spain, and historically we could say that the most important one, founded by him. Here we see again the plan of the cathedral, but actually here is already, this plan is from the 18th century, and we could see already the chapter house in this position, but actually in the north part of the chapter house, here in this plan, we could see a courtyard that actually was built later, and later on was fixing some problems that we had in this wall. So there were some problems of humidity in this wall that we could see that affected in the paintings. We see here the exterior side. So actually the chapter house is in this level here. And on top of it, there is another construction that actually is not covered by the stone facade. And here was the candle shop. So actually we could see that the remaining structures that were holding the candles to dry them. Here in this is an interior photo that shows that this wall, it was out of bricks, inside actually with arches, and outside was covered with a stone facade. So this is here we could start already the visit to the chapter house. This is the main door seated in the chapel of Santa Isabel de Hungría. And the chapter house, it has 2 rooms and reproduce the same scheme that was before in the western side. That is like a hallway and then the chapter room. This is the hallway that is not restored. Just the chapter room was restored, but we are in processes for restoring this area. Here, the iconographic tour of the chapter house is based on the life of Mary. And this is because of the, as I explained before, the descension of Mary and the imposition of the chasuble on San Ildefonsus. So in this hallway, we see a garden that is actually the Hortus Conclusus that is mentioned in the Songs of Songs, and represents a closed garden that is, it has the idea of the immaculate and purity of the Virgin Mary. There are 2 wardrobes that are hiding actually the paintings. The paintings go from the ceiling to the down. Here we could see that in this area. So actually this is the coffered ceiling of the room, and then the pavement, the floors are chequered marble original. And this is the chapter room. The chapter room was painted and done in 1509, 1510 by Juan de Borgoña. This is a photo after the restoration. And in this chapter room, we find 9 scenes from the life of Mary, and then the Pietà and the Last Judgment. Here we see that the room is not very big. It's like around 8 meters wide and 13 meters long and 9 meters high. Around it, there is like a walnut bench for the capital, and in the center, the chair for the bishop. And here we could see the all walls of the room. I brought here just a reference of a Florentine painting by Domenico Ghirlandaio, that it could be like a reference in the way of how to represent through architecture that open to other architectures or spaces. The influence of Juan de Borgoña, that was the director of all works. He was the trusted man from the cardinal. He was having definitely an Italian influence, especially in the construction of the perspective and the spaces. But as he was born in the north of Europe, we could see also that there is a Flemish influence based on the details of the figures or the nature. Well, before restoration, there were many analyses of the place. Here we could see some of the stratigraphic analysis made by a microscope, and this was very important to know what is. So this actually was almost the most important part, because it was very important to know what were the layers, the layers that were original, and the layers that were post interventions, so repaintings, dirt and stuff. So actually 8 samples from colors were taken, and we could see that we find some 1 or 2 layers of oil tempera that is based in animal glue or in egg, because we found some proteins in the analysis. And then after that, there is an oil based mainly in linseed oil, and then the varnishes. Then for the down in the right part, there is a stratigraphic sample in depth studying the plaster of the support of the paintings. In this plaster, we could see that it's mainly divided in 3 layers of plaster. The last one is the most thin one, and it's called blanquillo or espejuelo, and it was a layer that it contains an animal glue that it was important for giving the first paint. So in the end, this technique is not a fresco as it was assumed before the analysis. It's actually an oil on plaster, so a dry technique that it was used also 200 years before, for example, in the Palace of Pedralbes by another Spanish painter. So I will try to make this iconographic tour about the life of the Virgin, and I will try to talk about some pathologies, damages, or restoration techniques during the tour. So in this case, we start by the first scene, that is the embrace in the Golden Gate. That is actually the conception of Mary. And here, what we could find on the right are some cracks that were detected and were mapped for all the room. And this one maybe was the most important one because it was a crack that we could also see it in the outer walls. The cracks were, in any case, were all stable, so were no further movements for a very long time. So actually, they were just easily consolidated and reintegrated. On the left side, we see an infrared photo showing a point that it was used for Juan de Borgoña to make as a vanishing points to construct all the perspectives in the paintings. This is the Nativity of the Virgin, and here we could see that how the paintings were having a lot of dirt and varnishes applied a long time, and it was very important to clean them. Here we could see, I don't know if we could see it because of the resolution, but on the right side, in the floor design, we could see also incisions on the plaster to construct the perspective. This was also a technique from the Juan de Borgoña. And these are some infrared photos taken by Antonio. They were taken all around the room. And this shows the preparatory designs from Juan de Borgoña made in graphite and also with incisions before making the paintings. It's particularly interesting, the left one, because we think that there is a similarity with a portrait of Pedro Berruguete, and there is a theory that Juan de Borgoña was actually working with him. Pedro Berruguete was his master. And here was represented. Here we see the presentation of the Virgin in the temple. Again, problems with dirt and varnishes. And this is the Annunciation. In this painting, the most significant part is how the blue color of the cloaks of the Virgin is quite damaged. And actually, we found in the documents that the blues and also the greens in these paintings were in very bad conditions, just not much time after Juan de Borgoña painted them. And actually the first restorations were happening like half a century afterwards by Blas de Prado, and then 1 century later by Francisco de Aguirre. The problem that had these blues, it was that they contain copper, and this copper was oxidating and changing color, so actually getting darker, or even changing into dark green or brown. And we find also a lot of repaints on top of it. So actually, these blues here, that is actually not really in a very good quality repainted, were done later on by Blas de Prado or Francisco Aguirre. Yeah, here we could see the Annunciation before and after restoration. Yeah, here it's also happening. This is the visitation of the Virgin Mary to Saint Elizabeth. And this is the presentation of Jesus in the temple. Happening here, we could see also what happens to the greens before restoration. Here is the Dormition of the Virgin. Also the same problems with blues and greens. And here we could see some details about the textures of the fabrics that were the textures done by incisions in the plaster. And also, it's also relevant, this nimbus, that actually this is the only original nimbus in the paintings that is like in gold, but not completely gold like other ones that we could see later, that there were additions. Here we come to the assumption of the Virgin, that it was actually the paint that was most damaged because it's in the north wall, and many processes of humidity was happening because of the reasons that I talked before. So here the problem that we found is that the paint, there were many repaintings, of course, dirt, and also some problems with greens and blues. The thing was that before cleaning, it was very important to consolidate the paint because many parts of the paint were lifted and in a very not stable condition. So first, they must be applied to the plaster, and it was used animal glue with some heat and pressure that it could melt the paint and stick it to the wall. And then afterwards, we could start with the cleaning processes. Indeed, this image here, it was after these processes. So actually some parts are even in a worse condition. But this is because when the varnishes were clean and the dirt, many of the damages were hidden by then and appeared. So in the end, it was very important to make a chromatic restoration, a chromatic reintegration, let's say, using it was easy to be done because many parts of the adjoining places were in good conditions, so we could apply the same color to the parts that were in bad conditions. Well, this is the descending of the Virgin and the imposition of the chasuble to Saint Ildefonsus. Descend from the cross. Here, La Pietà, also with the infrared photographs showing the preparatory designs, and also some of the textures of the plaster here, where the nature is. And this is the resurrection, which is very nice. The gilding works on pastillates that shows like a volume in the armor of the soldier, and also some parts of silver that were oxidated. This is the last judgment, and here we could see the difference before and after cleaning. And also down here, I don't know if you could see it, but there are many stains, many droppings, and we found out that this was because of bad urinations. So in the end, as bad urinations contain oxalate, that it was actually irreversible to be restored, and the thing was that after the final layer for protecting against ultraviolet and varnish to the old paintings, there was an extra chromatic reintegration for these stains to disappear. This was the most important part. I think that if we are already finished with time, I think that we could stop it here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation for this amazing conference. I'm glad to be here and speak to you. I'm very pleased to be able to report to you today about the restoration work on the choir of the Cologne Cathedral. I would like to divide my presentation into two sections. First, I will tell you about the cleaning and restoration of the furnishing inside the choir. Then about the current restoration of the outer walls of the choir chapel, especially about the conservation of the Drachenfels-Drachheit, the building material from which the cathedral choir was constructed in the Middle Age. First, a few words about the building history of the cathedral. The choir is the oldest part of the cathedral. The foundation stone for the Gothic construction was laid in 1248. A main reason for replacing this existing Romanesque building by a modern, much larger one was the fact that in 1164 the relics of the three Magi were housed in the cathedral, exposed in a precious shrine. Since then, Cologne became one of the most important pilgrimage sites in the Middle Age. Here you can see the construction progress from 1248, and the newly erected Gothic choir was consecrated in 1322. By 1520, large parts of the nave and of the side aisles had been completed up to a height of 20 meters, as well as the south tower up to a height of almost 60 meters. Then construction was halted and interrupted for more than 300 years. The cathedral was then completed in a second construction phase in the 19th century, and in only 38 years, at 157 meters, the west towers were the tallest building in the world in this time. First part of the lecture, cleaning and restoration concept of the furnishings. We look at the inner choir of Cologne Cathedral, richly decorated with sculptures, wall paintings, altar pieces, carved choir stalls, and golden reliquary shrine of the three Magi. Cologne Cathedral is the most visited building in Germany with over 6 million visitors a year. The conservation of the important part of Cologne Cathedral is one of the most demanding tasks of the cathedral workshop and a perpetual challenge. The ongoing maintenance of the important historical furnishing is carried out according to a comprehensive plan of caretaking. For the cleaning of the furnishing alone, the cathedral workshop has employed its own restorer. More than 100 works of art and furnishings are recorded in a care plan. This lists the cleaning and restoration cycles and who is responsible for the work. In the following, I would like to show you this with a few examples. The choir pillars in the inner choir date from the years 1270 until 1290. The medieval colors were largely painted over in the 19th century. A restoration was carried out from 2009 to 2012. Dirt, however, largely consisting of dust and textile remains of the cathedral visitors' clothing, is deposited on the figures. It has been shown that after about 6 years, the dirt builds up and bonds with the undercoat of the paints. It is therefore important to remove the dirt before this time when cleaning the hard-to-reach figures. Similar cleaning cycles have also occurred to other furnishings such as altar pieces and other figures. Other cleaning cycles occur with the wooden furnishing. such as the 14th century choir stalls, which were extensionally cleaned and repaired by an external wood restorer in 2021 and 2022. Since they must be in permanent use, they must be regularly cleaned of dust and dirt. This is done by the restorer of the cathedral workshop, who is responsible for the cleaning. The time of the corona pandemic, with the partial closure of the cathedral, was used by the cathedral workshop to extensively restore and conserve the mosaic floor from the 1890s. First, the dirt layer was removed. During the restoration, cavities in the subsoil were filled, missing mosaic stones were added, and cracks were closed. This was followed by the application of a preservation wax layer. Today, the mosaic floors are cleaned by special cleaning machines carried out by the cathedral's cleaning staff. In just 3 examples, I have tried to give you an understanding of the care and restoration of the cathedral's furnishing. It's important to record all the furnishing and works of art to fix the date of a basic restoration, and based on this, developed cleaning and restoration goals that are oriented to the special requirement of the work of art. After this, I will tell you about the current restoration of outer walls of the radiating chapels, which are being restored since 2021. Especially about the conservation of the Drachenfels-Strachite, the main building material of the Gothic choir and outer parts erected in the Middle Age. The Drachenfels-Strachite comes from the Siebengebirge, which is located south of Cologne. The mountains of the Siebengebirge were formed about 25 million years ago. Loose rock made of ash weathered in the following period, and volcanic peaks made of harder rocks were exposed. The basic substance, the matrix, consists primarily of feldspar. Sanidine crystal, you can see them here. Sanidine crystal, which are typical for the Drachenfels-Strachite, are embedded in the matrix. They consist of the same material as the matrix, but crystallized earlier. You can see again the typical appearance of sanidines embedded in the matrix. Here again are the sections of Cologne Cathedral that were built of Drachenfels-Strachite in the Middle Age. The material was also used on other buildings down the Rhine. For example, at the cathedral in Xanten and Utrecht. On the basis of research project, we are working together with the Xanten Cathedral Workshop and Utrecht Cathedral. The working group is also supported by external experts, the Technical University of Cologne and the Monument Office. The building lodge of Bern Cathedral contributes its special expertise to the restoration issues. Annette Löffel is here. She will talk after me. Thank you very much for your support from Bern. We regularly put on our work progress up for discussion and welcome critical debate, here with colleagues from Bern and Xanten. The inventory showed that we still have a very high stock of original substance despite major damages. Construction seams showing individual construction phases, beam holes indicating the position of scaffolding, original surfaces with trace of workmanship, as well as stonemason marks and inscription can be recognized. Extensive mapping was carried out in preparation for the restoration. The entire mapping was done with the Metigo map program from Focus Leipzig. In this way, the contamination and the lot of biogenic growth were also recorded, also in order to work out a cleaning concept. The damage mapping showed that many damages are rather close to the surface, which can easily recognize in a detailed image. Here you can see the cracks near the surface, and also as in a RAM image, raster electronic microscope image. Here you see the sonidine, the matrix, and the micro cracks, especially from the different expansion of the sonidine in the matrix. The condition was classified according to a traffic light system. Here it can be seen that the extent of damages is limited. In the following, the stone replacement was defined, which could be very limited. So this results in the restoration goals. As few stone replacement as possible, preservation of the joint cut from the period of construction, preservation of as many surfaces as possible with medieval features, and so the result is more conservation instead of restoration. From these goals, I would like to present you the restoration concept. Cleaning the stone surface of Drachenfelsdrachheit is necessary before restoration. The black crusts cause high temperature differences on the surfaces, which led to great tension in the stone due to the material properties. First, higher plants, such as mosses and lichens, are killed with an ethanol water mixture and finally removed with a hot steam. After this, the surface are blasted with furnace slag at a blasting pressure of less than 1 bar. This means the crusts are only reduced without completely removing the patina and without damaging the crystal structures of the stone. Here is the result before and after cleaning. Since only as little stone replacement as possible is to take place, and missing parts in the stone are filled in with mortar. The mortar was developed by the Cathedral workshop, especially for the requirements of the Drachenfelsdrachheit. Here it was possible to draw on the experience gained from the Cathedral workshops of Xanten and Bern. In cooperation with the Technical University, 2 bachelor's and 1 master thesis dealt with the Drachenfelsdrachheit and requirement of conservation. Here you can see restored sections. The still wet mortar was colored with a pigment water mixture in order to adapt them to the existing material, like a fresco. Here, and a lot of them. Profile elements and edge courses are reconstructed to rebuild the import architectural lines. Soft shells with original surface were placed back. The measures are, of course, continuously signed. Final 2 examples of how the outer walls at the choir chapel look after the restoration. The conservation concept that has been developed has a great influence on further work on the medieval parts of Cologne Cathedral. I hope that I have been able to give you a good overview of the measures both inside and outside the cathedral choir. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for the invitation. And I send you some warm greetings from the European Dombaumeistervereinigung. You said I am the president since last year, and I'm very pleased to see some members of the Dombaumeistervereinigung and some future members maybe. So I'm going to speak about the restoration of the choir vaults in Bern Cathedral. You see here a picture of Bern Cathedral. It was built from 1421 to 1574 and completed the spire at the end of the 19th century. Just that you see where the cathedral stands in the city. This is the choir vault in Bern Cathedral. It's about 10 meters and 24 meters big. It was built in the pre-Reformation period from 1514 to 1517. It was finished just before Reformation in 1528. 11 years after the building, after the vault was completed, there was the Reformation in Bern Cathedral, and all the saints you see on the vault had no service. So the occasion of the conservation was the 500-year celebration for which the parish wanted the vault to be cleaned. So I got some offers from the parish. They wanted to clean it within 3 weeks from a skyscraper. And that, of course, was not the way to do it. We cleaned it during 3.5 years afterwards and just completed the restoration before the celebration in 1517 then. Something about the iconography. It's 86 saints hanging on the ceiling in the vault. There's in the east, it starts with the Holy Trinity, then followed by Maria, St. Vincent, and then some ancestors of Jesus, the apostles, some local saints then the evangelists, sacred clan, church father, martyrs, saints, bishops, founder of the order and abbots, and then at the very end, to the west, the Quattro Coronati, which are the patrons of the stonemasons and builders. So it's a huge program of 86 figures, which were the original color from 1517. That was a sensation we found out. Until 2012, we thought that its vault had been repainted several times. That was the general opinion, that there's no original, that it hasn't been repainted, as we know that from other cathedrals in the whole Europe. But it was this sensation that we had the original color from 1517 on all of the 86 figures. So I show you some pictures. We call it the heavenly court because all the saints are sitting on clouds in the ceiling of the vault. You can see here Holy Ghost, Saint Mary in the middle axis, and then the Saint Vincent, who is the patron of Bern Minster, Bern Cathedral, and Godfather sitting in the ceiling, and Jesus. So here you see Achatius, who is one of the patrons at the time of the city of Bern. He was the leader of 10,000 knights, and he helped the Bernese people to win the wars in the Burgundy Wars against the Karl the Kühne, we say. At the very end, the Quattro Coronati, and a writing saying that this part of the cathedral had been completed in 1517. A very short history. So the vault was built in 1514 to 1517 by master builder Pieter Pfister, decorated by Niklaus Manuel Deutsch, a painter, famous painter in the city of Bern. Then there was the Reformation, 1528. 1863, there was the demolition of the second closure of the choir. I'm showing you some pictures afterwards. And then in 1874, the city of Bern, who was the owner since then, the whole vault was built by the city of Bern, not by the church, because the owner and master builder was the city of church at the time. In 1874, the city of Bern donates the cathedral to the parish. And that was a great gift, but it was also an expensive gift. You can imagine that. Fortunately, the parish didn't have the money to repaint the vaults or repaint anything in the cathedral. That was great luck for the original painting. In 1911, there were some static reinforcements of the vault. They repainted the vault ribs. I'm going to show you that afterwards. And then the first comprehensive restoration took place in 2014 to 2017. That's what I'm talking about now. We had some first small scaffolds in 2012 for testing and analysis. And then we saw that sensation that it is the original polychromy from the 16th century. Here are some pictures of the closure of the choir. The choir had been closed until the end of the 19th century by a closure. That helped the figures to survive Reformation, I'm sure about that. You see the first one built in the 16th century, here, a reconstruction. And you see the second one at the end of the 18th century, which was removed in 1863 for a singers' festival. They needed space. So it was demolition of that. You see the actual state today of the choir. You see an inside in the choir. What you can see here is some samples of cleaning we did in 2012. So we see how dirty the whole vault was. So the condition in 2012, the vault was in a very good condition, basically. It was very dirty, it was very dusty. It had a lot of cracks. I'm going to tell you about that afterwards. The figures had the painting that were in a good condition, but the binder had been altered. The metals had been oxidated, and they look a bit different today than before because of alteration. So inside in the building site, 2014, that's what it looks like. And then what did we do around the figures? Because you can see here, it's not only the figures we cleaned, it's also the vault fields that we cleaned as the background of the figures. It consisted basically in careful dusting, in dry cleaning of the fields, in wet cleaning afterwards, because it was a lot of dirt over the 500 years on its surfaces, then restoring the relevant cracks, and the documentation, of course. Also, the background of the figures dates from 1517. All the moresques you had seen on the pictures date also from 1517. It's pure original from the 16th century. At first sight, we saw a lot of disturbing cracks, but they turned out to be shrinkage cracks created during construction while the drying process took place of the lime plaster. So there was no danger, we had no need, no measures were needed to close all those cracks. And we wanted no action because these had overlasted for 500 years and we better don't touch them. You can see the cracks here. No danger about that. There were a few dangerous cracks with loose shells behind, so we closed it with dry slaked lime mortar, with PLMA injection mortar, and the borders were secured with cyclododecon. You see that the restorers know what I'm talking about. Then there was the dry cleaning of the whole vault. We used about 900 Acapad sponges, latex sponges, to clean the whole vault. It's about 250 square meters. We cleaned it centimeter per centimeter. Our restorers with our hands up during 3 years. It was a whole lot of work, you can imagine. One of the big problems was some retouches which had been made in 1911 when they made steel reinforcements in the vault ribs. They had damaged a bit the vault fields, and then they had to retouch it, and they retouched it in the color of the dusty vault. So when we cleaned it, we saw all these retouches. You can see here. And that was even more work to remove them afterwards. It was with a glue-bounded collar. Fortunately, we could remove it with water afterwards. Just one picture of the perfectly imperfect vault shields. You can see how they were working in the Middle Age. They were retouching in the Middle Age already. Here, for example. These are retouchments from the 16th century. You can see in the signature of Niklaus Manuel Deutsch how the color was too fluid and it dropped down. We left that, of course. But now I'm going to talk about the keystones. So it was an incredible richness of detail in these keystones. They were in very good condition. I said that already. It was untouched surfaces from the 16th century. And we had astonishing technological findings on execution techniques in the 16th century because it was all pure original. So the condition was a lot of dust and cobwebs, just some expressions of that. A lot of dust caused also by the warm heating that had been installed at the end of the 19th century. It was run with coal, and you can imagine how the dust is going up in the vaults. He had a very warm nose until the 19th century, but it's dirty now. So you can see the high quality of sculpture work we have in the ceiling. Just some impressions. You can also see the difference between the different hands of sculptures. You can see that the Maria is a bit plump in the face, and the other one is really rich details. We could make a difference between women and men. Women are always in a plain faces with a fair complexion and very nicely done, and the men are a bit more details and partly desert companions with 3-day beards and so on. Some impressions again. Here you can see 3D beards, painted even, and all the wrinkles, it's exceptional detail, and all the clothes were as they were at the time. All the figures were, for example, an undergarment in white linen. You can't see that from below, but it was there. So they were completely, perfectly dressed. It had to be perfect at that time. So we also got some new understandings of technologies while analyzing the keystones. For example, the white was not always the same. You can see, if you watch the glove of the bishop, it was painted in oil painting because they wanted a shiny effect, shiny silk. And you can see the garment here, which was painted in a matte color to have an impression of linen. That was a glue-bound color then. So we had different bounders, different colors at the same figure. You can see some details on the metal, gold. It wasn't gold, it was intermediate gold. So they didn't have a lot of money at the 16th century, so they thinly struck on gold on silver. So it's silver with a thin layer of gold. And there are some lacquer coating above. You can see how they designed the button placket, for example, here, with some lacquers over the metal. Illustrations was also a big theme. Colored varnishes would have been used, for example, for the dragon here. All altered and not any more so bright than it was in the beginning, of course. The green and red lacquer on the head of the dragon of St. Margaret, for example. You can see these illustrations. Also for the incarnates, we had some interesting observings. We could see that, for example, the red it was in different layers of lead white and intermediate layers. For example, the red cheeks of Maria was in an interlayer, and there was always a thin glaze of white cover over everything, and on that there were the finesses. Like, for example, the eyebrows, like hairs painted. And if you go to the outside, most of the time you don't find that last layer because of weathering, it's gone. So that had led to some strange reconstructions. You can see here as well, on the finishing layer, here, you see the hair, you see the pupil, the pupil glazing. All that is on the finishing layer. At the outside, you can't find that anymore because it's always gone. So if you reconstruct the incarnates like that, at least with some scurril, clumsy reconstruction, this is in the main porch of Bern Cathedral, reconstruction of incarnates, without the knowledge we have today. Due to age, the damages caused were due to aging, due to construction, building time, caused by gunshots, due to probing in 1990, and due to technological execution. So here's some craquelets due to aging. What you can see here is some damages caused during construction. Here, several figures had these damages. because the scaffolds were too small to put I would like to show that, but you can read that in the publication afterwards. You can see here damages during construction already. Then they were hunting with shotguns. Maybe during the Reformation, they were shooting on them. We could find some traces of shotguns and lead balls even. Damage due to probing. Here was a restorer in 1990. He was seeking for the original color, not remarking that he had the original color in front of him. So he was seeking until he was on the stone, and you see the damage he caused, because he had the opinion that it had to be repainted several times. There were damages due to plaster casts in 1910. You can see the traces from opening the casts. Here. Residue that were on those from the making of the plaster casts after the cleaning then. We didn't do plaster casts because of the damages that had caused. We had digital replicas, so you can see the dimensions of the stones here, 3D visualization. You can see the rear sides, who had been carved roughly, not as beautiful as the side. There is an impression of the cleaning before and afterwards. Here as well, before and afterwards. Then we had the documentation, mapping of course, databases. We have on all keystones the testing of the colors. I don't have time to describe this. And what we changed is the color frame on the wall trips, because they had been repainted, the wall trips, in 1911 in a red that was not suitable to the figures anymore, in a dirty red, and we found the original red on the rear sides of the figure. So that was the only thing we changed in the vault. The rest was just cleaning. So the figures have a nice background again. We found the caput mortuum, the rose tone, on the rear sides, and we painted that with silicate craze, so completely reversible. So before and after the cleaning. And this is the restored vault. Thank you for your
Thank you very much.
attention.
Thank you, Prof. CEO. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, a very good afternoon to you all. Conservation and spirituality, tourism and faith, Malta. An equilibrium which has defined us over a number of years. And I do believe that our Catholic Christian faith was and still forms an intrinsic part of what makes us Maltese. It is part of our identity. And the world is changing every day, yet we must always remain vigilant and respectful to our religious traditions. And therefore, the natural question comes to mind: how can religion and tourism walk hand in hand together? How can they be merged? I would say it's all about, first of all, education. It's also about awareness and appreciation of what we have. And as Maltese, we boast unique religious traditions that go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. Our places of worship, our churches, are visited by thousands of tourists every year. I'm sure that most of you, and if you're not aware of this, I will let you know today. In Malta, we have 365 churches. That's one church for every day. And when you count all the places of worship which we have in Malta, dating back from the megalithic temples up until today, you would find over 500 places of worship. So faith tourism is in fact an important niche which we are investing in, and one which I do believe is helping us to be more innovative in the way that we share and appreciate even more our religious heritage. An example of this is the fact that at the moment, the Malta Tourism Authority is working hard with other countries, Mediterranean countries, to include Malta in St. Paul's spiritual trail. This is a practical way of sharing Malta's history with tourists who embark on their religious pilgrimage, no matter which religion we are talking about. Another aspect that we must explore is that of exporting our traditions so that they can be shared in the heart of the Catholic world, the Vatican. And the recent news that in September of next year, the local statue of Saint Cajetan of Tien of Hamrun will be exhibited in the Basilica of Santa Maria delle Valle in Rome, in the Vatican, for a month, complemented with a procession in St. Peter's Basilica, will be a proud moment for all of us Maltese. This is the way of how we can do things in the future which fully respect the conservation and our spirituality from a cultural and devotional point of view. By drawing attention to the island's religious history, faith tourism can encourage conservation efforts, make them sustainable, and also help raise awareness about the importance of protecting historic landmarks and artifacts. And this can be especially important for an island state like Malta, where the preservation of our cultural heritage is critical to maintaining our unique identity and at the same time continuing to attract visitors. These are some of the things which make Malta a unique selling point with tourists, whether they are coming here for their first time or whether they are repeat visitors. It provides us opportunities for cultural exchanges and dialogues, like this conference here, which I do believe is a big success. So hats off to the organizers, and thank you for being here with us. Here we are allowing visitors to learn about different religious traditions and fostering a greater understanding of diversity and tolerance. Without a doubt, this certainly helps to promote Malta's reputation as a welcoming and inclusive destination, which can attract a broad range of visitors from around the world. Allow me to thank you all once again for being here, especially also Eminenza Cardinale Piero Parolin, who also was in Malta over the past day. A special thank you also goes to Malta's ambassador for the Vatican, His Excellency Frank Zammit, and the foundation of the Co-Cathedral for your hard work. And I do believe that what we experienced last week, the tapestries, is testament to your perseverance and to the wealth of knowledge which you possess within the foundation. And also, I believe, to all the great things which we are still to see and all the projects which are in the pipeline. And hats off, yes, to you. A big thank you for your hard work and dedication, which what you are doing, you are not only preserving tradition, but you are preserving our identity. Whether you are a traveler or resident, one cannot not appreciate the beauty and the jewel which we have here, the Co-Cathedral, the Caravaggio, the tapestries, which have been recently restored, and also work together so that we ensure that our religious heritage is preserved, celebrated, and shared with others. Thank you once again for your attention, and let us continue to promote the value and importance of faith tourism for the years to come. Thank you.